From the very beginning, our high command had been utterly, hopelessly, head over heels enchanted by those human entertainment videos, like a pack of starving scavengers discovering an all-you-can-eat buffet of pure, concentrated adorableness. Cute little clips of humans rescuing injured animals with tears streaming down their faces, adopting orphans from war zones while singing lullabies, crying buckets over sad movies, and always, without fail, choosing mercy over violence, even when the script practically begged for a dramatic execution scene. Our analysts binged hours upon hours of this stuff. Soldiers sparing enemies who just tried to vaporize them, civilians throwing themselves in front of strangers to take plasma bolts meant for someone else. Entire multi-season sagas built around the triumph of kindness, forgiveness, and group hugs. The conclusion was unanimous, gleeful, and arrogant enough to be measured on the Richter scale. "Clearly a prey species," the briefing officer declared, mandibles clicking like he'd just won the galactic lottery. Soft, emotional, obsessed with not hurting anyone, even the people actively trying to hurt them. They broadcast their greatest, most hilarious weakness to the entire galaxy as primetime entertainment. We will descend, demand surrender, and they will fold like a house of wet playing cards in a hurricane. We believed it completely. We were, after all, the dominant predator species of the sector, armored like walking battle tanks, clawed like industrial shredders, faster than a railgun slug, stronger than a cargo lifter on stimulants, armed with plasma lances hot enough to turn mountains into fondue and orbital strike capability that could rearrange continents for fun. Humans? Pale, clawless, slow, no natural weapons whatsoever, not even a respectable poisonous spine. Easy meat, snack-sized, barely an appetizer. That was the fatal, fundamentally flawed, cosmically idiotic assumption. The insertion pods screamed through the atmosphere like 1,000 angry meteors that had just discovered caffeine. Retro thrusters flaring as we slammed into a quiet suburban area outside what the humans called Seattle, hard enough to register on their seismic monitors as mildly concerning. The pods hadn't even finished cooling. Some were still glowing cherry red, when the hatches blew open and we poured out, weapons hot, expecting instant, tearful, on their knees surrender. Instead, chaos. Beautiful, hilarious, pants-wettingly terrifying chaos. Some humans grabbed their offspring and ran screaming, which fit the profile perfectly. Others sprinted toward the still-smoking, possibly radioactive pods. Toward us, carrying blankets, bottles of water, little red boxes with white crosses on them like they were handing out party favors. One elderly female actually waved cheerfully and shouted, "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? We've got Narcan." Our squad leader, poor doomed Krithix, hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for a human in a bright yellow jacket labeled Fire Rescue to reach him and start asking if anyone inside the pod needed extraction or emotional support. Krithix panicked and fired a warning burst into the air that accidentally vaporized a flock of seagulls. That was the moment everything went sideways, upside down, and then did cartwheels into a dumpster fire. Sirens began wailing like the entire planet had collectively stepped on a Lego. More humans arrived, some in blue uniforms with sidearms, police, some in red trucks with hoses longer than our landing struts, some in absolutely nothing tactical at all except righteous fury and a bathrobe. A male human in plaid pajamas and bunny slippers emerged from a nearby house wielding what appeared to be a gardening hoe with the enthusiastic fury of a berserker who'd just discovered espresso. He fought like a demon freshly escaped from whatever hell humans believe in, screaming something about, "Not in my neighborhood, you tentacled freaks," until he finally went down under 3 stun rounds, still swinging. We assumed the uniforms meant organized military resistance. We opened fire in earnest, expecting them to scatter like startled herbivores. Big mistake. Colossal. Galactic record book mistake. The unarmed ones kept trying to drag their wounded away while apologizing for the inconvenience. The lightly armed ones, police, a few security guards, that one off-duty Marine who happened to be visiting his sister and showed up with a personally owned arsenal that made our armory look like a toy store, held us at bay with small-caliber weapons that should have been laughable, adorable little pop guns. They weren't. They fought dirty, smart, and with a ferocity that suggested they'd been waiting their entire lives for this exact moment, possibly rehearsing in their garages. For 2 solid hours, we pushed block by block, confident the human military would be slow to respond. After all, prey species don't maintain rapid reaction forces, right? They probably have to file paperwork in triplicate before deploying a strongly worded letter. Wrong. Spectacularly, hilariously wrong. They arrived in waves. First National Guard units that seemed to materialize out of thin air like they'd been hiding in the Starbucks drive-thru. Then regular army rolling in with hardware that looked suspiciously like they'd been expecting company. By then, the civilians had delayed us long enough for proper defenses to form, using nothing but determination, improvised barricades, and an apparently limitless supply of Molotov cocktails made from craft beer bottles. The battle turned brutal, short, and deeply educational. Those of us still fighting went down hard and fast. Those who dropped weapons and raised empty claws were zip-tied, disarmed, and, confusingly, given water, granola bars, and basic medical care by the same people who'd just been trying to turn us into abstract art. Which brings us to the room where I sat, fluids pooling at my feet in a puddle large enough to support its own ecosystem, staring at the human female across from me. "You're adorable," she said, smiling. It wasn't a maternal smile. It was the smile of a predator, wondering if dinner would give her an excuse after a week-long fast, and whether it would pair well with a nice Chianti. That was when I realized we had completely misunderstood everything on a level that future generations would use as a cautionary tale. The color drained from my anatomy so fast it left skid marks, as if my soul had muttered, "You're on your own, genius," grabbed a suitcase, and fled to a nicer universe with fewer plasma burns. This soft, pale-skinned biped, utterly devoid of claws, fangs, armor plating, or any physical quality that screamed apex predator, was looking at me like I was a lightly seasoned appetizer. Her gaze alone triggered flight instincts buried so deep they probably dated back to single-celled organisms that once hid from things with eyes and bad intentions. Her smile shifted to pity as she noticed the growing lake at my feet. "Your people found those cute entertainment vids and actually believed they were real, didn't you?" She made a sad little chuckle that somehow contained the weight of 1,000 disappointed teachers. "For all your superior," she actually made air quotes with her fingers, which was both condescending and terrifyingly casual, "intelligence and advanced weaponry, you completely missed the point of the stories. We weren't telling the galaxy we're kind and don't kill things in combat. We were trying to convince ourselves to be better. You took the lessons we disguised as entertainment for ourselves as a weakness you could exploit." Her face flashed to an expression of frozen granite. No compassion, no empathy, not even mild concern for continued existence, for exactly one heartbeat. I've had nightmares about that single blink ever since. So far, the streak is unbroken, and I've started charging admission. She continued in a softer tone, not kindness, just less razor-like. "You'll live because you're not resisting, at least as long as that doesn't change." Then she smiled conspiratorially, like we were sharing an inside joke about the end of my species. "We're unfortunately very prone to bad things if we're not careful to stay mentally positive. It's really a terrible flaw. See, we've been at war with ourselves, individually, internally, and as a species, since shortly after we began. We eventually made peace, grew beyond prejudice and senseless violence, at least until your people sent you to wake up what we'd laid to rest. Can't kill it, it's part of us, but we did manage to convince it to go dormant." A single tear gathered in the corner of her eye, which felt deeply unfair, like being judged by a shark that also minored in philosophy. You need to tell your people we don't want to kill them all, but if they keep coming as killers, we will. Tell them about the prisoners we've taken and how we've treated them. Tell them what happened to those who didn't surrender before engaging. She gestured to my fellow survivors being fed hot meals, actual hot meals with spices and everything, housed comfortably in what they called guest quarters, and receiving medical care for their injuries from doctors who kept apologizing for the wait time. Then she pointed out the window where fallen soldiers, ours, were being buried in individual graves with markers, ceremony, and respect, complete with a chaplain saying words over each one. I thought back to the briefing videos, the smug certainty, and suddenly understood. Those stories weren't documentaries. They were aspirational propaganda aimed squarely at humanity itself. Desperate attempts to teach restraint, mercy, and hope to a species that clearly needed the reminder. And we mistook the struggle for weakness. And then the final humbling realizations hit me like a cargo hauler driven by a caffeinated maniac. We were lucky, absurdly, cosmically, win the lottery while being struck by lightning in a good way lucky, that we'd landed in a liberal region of the United States with some of the strictest civilian firearm restrictions in the nation. A few handguns and hunting rifles had been bad enough, turned our routine annexation into a 2-hour bloodbath. If we'd dropped into Texas, Alabama, Switzerland, rural Finland, places where civilian and walking armory are practically synonyms, we'd have been reduced to abstract art before the pods finished cooling. Entire neighborhoods would have responded with belt-fed enthusiasm, air support from private helicopters, and probably a few enthusiastic grandpas with surplus anti-tank weapons. I shuddered so hard I nearly added another puddle. Even more chilling. Humanity had already seized our landed ships and somehow our orbital fleet. Later reports confirmed they'd hacked our IFF codes using techniques we still don't understand, something involving a teenager, a gaming laptop, and an unhealthy amount of energy drinks. They'd turned our own weapons on the remaining invasion force with terrifying, almost gleeful efficiency. We had poked a sleeping dragon the size of a planet, handed it a triple espresso, and then given it a specific external target to focus on. That dragon was now wide awake, united, motivated, and exchanging recipes for anti-ship munitions on group chats. I realized that a society raised on principles of love your enemy, turn the other cheek, and blessed are the peacemakers, had still produced people who, when pushed, fought like cornered wolverines with PhDs in asymmetric warfare and a minor in creative demolition. The same culture that taught mercy also taught that mercy is a choice, not a compulsion, and that choice ends the moment you start the killing. Peace, I finally understood, comes as much from mentality as capability. A disarmed populace might have surrendered faster and spared us the embarrassment. An armed populace with no cultural restraint might have escalated to atrocities that would haunt the galaxy. Humanity had somehow threaded the needle, capable of violence so terrible it makes hardened soldiers reconsider career choices, yet constantly striving not to use it, until someone forces the issue with plasma fire. Bottom line, humanity as a whole can be your greatest ally or your absolute worst nightmare, and they'll bring snacks either way. How you approach them determines which one answers the door, and whether they bring cookies or orbital bombardment. Violence would lead only to extinction for us, swift, thorough, and probably live-streamed. Respectful peace and cooperation was the only sane path left. I just hoped our leaders were smart enough to listen before humanity decided the dragon needed a full cardio workout.